Hi there. How are you today? My name is Andrea Johnson. I'm the Intentional Optimist, and you're tuned into our guest speaker series or our conversations with the Intentional Optimist. And today, as my guest, I have the incomparable Katja Schleicher.
Hi.
Welcome.
Good morning to you. Good afternoon to me, right?
Yes. So let's talk about why it's afternoon to you. Where are you in the world?
At the moment, I'm back in my studio in my office in The Hague in the Netherlands, which is a city of peace and justice and quite an
Yeah.
international hub. And that's why living here and working from here is a great pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, when we first chatted for our podcast episode that actually aired Monday, if you haven't heard it, it's episode 111. And it's basically about words and why they matter. And Katja gives a great conversation, and you'll get to hear a little bit of her background that you might not hear today. Today, she's going to teach us a little bit. But when we first chatted and you said, I live in The Hague, I was like, gobsmacked. You live where? And I love that you are a communications expert and you live in a place of peace and justice, because in order to have that, you have to be able to communicate.
Yeah, and if you look at The Hague's history, it's all about that. Dale Carnegie,
Mm,
the Dale Carnegie, already after the First World War, it kind of funded the Peace Palace here.
huh.
And really, yeah, in 19 in after the First World War, 1918, the European heads and people from the US were trying to bring the world together for the first time. And if you look if you go to the Peace Palace here, you see all these these efforts, what people
Mm,
already at that time knew is necessary
yeah.
to bring people together, to make things possible, to make the world go round,
Mm,
to let people do business. And it was really, really a great effort. And as divided as societies are today, I think peace and justice is more and more important. Yeah.
oh, absolutely. I mean, you can't turn on the news without having that right in your face, right? We need peace, we need justice in order to
Yeah.
have peace in certain areas. So is that what brought you to The Hague to live there?
No, that was more coincidence, honestly.
Okay.
It was more that my husband and I, we were looking. I mean, we are talking. The end of the first decade. We were looking for a nice place, and there was London, and there was Barcelona, and that didn't. London was already at that time quite expensive, and Barcelona wasn't quite a match with office and everything. And then the realtor we asked, could you find a space for us? He said, yeah, I have something for you. I said, where? In The Hague. And my husband said, I grew up there, so why would I go back? And yeah,
Oh.
yeah. And that was a coincidence. And but best decision ever. Yeah, it was cool. And
So
it's although it's in the west of Europe, it's at the beach. We have a beach, and 10 minutes by bike, and I can travel everywhere pretty fast.
yeah. It's, when I looked at it on the map, like you think you know where things are in the world, right? And I grew up internationally. I grew up in Seoul, Korea. So you think you know where things are in the world until you really look at a map and you're like, oh, that's where The Hague is.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's where the Netherlands are. It's like in my
Mm.
mind, I did Asia and I did the United States. So Europe is a little fuzzy. But my husband and I were talking about how Europeans tend to just kind of move from country to country, even though it's like it just seems more natural for Europeans to do that kind of thing. And is this a perception that I have as an American?
In comparison to the United States, it is
Sure.
more common. Yes, yes. But think of Europe and all the cultures and the way the communication works over
Right.
here. Um, think of it more like the if you were living, you were going to Texas, right? You're
I'm
about
going to Texas tomorrow. Yes.
exactly. So Texans have a way of doing things. The howdy and and all that, Ron
Y'all.
with an accent and owning the world, and you know that. So yeah. So and people from the east or west coast or from Wisconsin, they would do things differently.
Hmm.
And if you ex- give that a little bit more accent, you find what happens in Europe. I
Okay.
mean, of course, it is not a common thing. It is not the most natural thing to move from Helsinki to Madrid. right, which would be Finland and Spain. But indeed, Europe as a culture, although it is very, very, very divergent, is easier to comprehend, and you have to be more open, which I think is one of the big advantages if you come from that
Oh,
part of the
sure.
world. Yeah, you know that things can be done totally different, and they'll still be okay.
And the world will keep turning.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yes.
So let's dive in a little bit to communication.
Yeah.
You told me before we hit live, the go live button, that you just spent 4 weeks traveling between the couch and the wine and the cheese and chatting with hubby. And one of the notes that I had in from when we had our podcast episode that I wanted to dive into a little deeper, because you focus on intercultural communication and you just kind of gave us a little bit of an intro to that. But let's talk about, if we can, the culture of the men and women talking, how that affects the home, the workplace, the communities, all that kind of thing. So let's get into that just a little bit.
Before we divide into men and women, let's make absolutely crystal clear that everybody understands that we all human beings, we have feminine and masculine parts in us.
Okay.
All of us. And that's a very, very, very good thing, because it kind of equips us to with a complete set of communication skills. Sometimes a typical masculine trait is that you are going straight to the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes even being opinionated and judgmental, like saying, okay, do this, exclamation mark, is a masculine trait.
Mm.
It doesn't necessarily mean it is belonging to men or women,
Sure.
right? But it is helpful if you are able to communicate in a masculine way, do this now, as well in a feminine way. What do you think about doing this
Mm-hmm.
until tomorrow afternoon? Both ways are equally important when we communicate, depending on the situation.
Mm.
If you're a mom and you need to leave the house as quickly as possible, and you try to encourage your 5-year-old son or your 5-year-old daughter,
Or your 14-year-old son.
exactly, to get dressed or put on shoes or whatever is necessary to leave the house in time to get to the school bus or wherever you need to go, that's probably a hard thing. Or you learn the hard way that asking that as a question very often doesn't deliver any result.
Right.
But the moment you say very directly, say, okay, Lucas, 5 minutes, put your pants on now. And all of a sudden, like a miracle, it works. So
Yeah.
it is not you being a man or a woman, it is you using your feminine and your masculine traits. We have
Sure.
both.
Yeah.
Right? And now it's getting interesting when indeed we grow up. Mostly we are more successful with one of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow, it doesn't necessarily mean that girls, women are more successful with the feminine one. Statistically and historically, unfortunately, this is still the case. I'll
Sure.
be a good girl and all that, and and by boys say, so yeah, be strong, all that, all
Sure.
that. We in between know that this is not leading us anywhere. So one of these patterns, the feminine or the masculine one, is making you more successful. So that's
Right.
why, because we are lazy creatures, you use that.
Path of
So
least resistance. Yeah.
yeah. So and then there is a point in time, especially when it comes down to career or to family, then you say like, okay, now I'm kind of at the end of my toolkit. I used
Mm.
everything, and I don't get anywhere anymore. What's the problem? And then it helps to look into the other trait and to taste it, to try it out. What would
Mm.
happen if I would talk to my colleague the opposite way? So exactly, if you were the person as a boss and had said, do this now, maybe try a question, right? And
Okay.
if you never are that kind of person who gave an order, you might try that, because that will equip you with the complete skill set in communication, and it will
Mhm.
make your communication more successful and more sustainable, which is an important point.
Well, I think that it's so important to remember that, like you pointed out a couple things, that girls are conditioned one way, boys are conditioned another. And I think some cultures are more intense about that than others. And, being in the United States, that's very intense. The history of our country and the history of the way we do things, it's very intense in the like girls do this thing and boys do this thing. But I also grew up in Asia, which is also very intense in those areas. So knowing the culture that you're in, but uh, I actually am just putting a banner up here. When you hit a plateau, it's a good idea to try the opposite energy,
Yeah.
because I think that that's a really important thing to understand, because a lot of times, I mean, I know for a fact that women will hit like 45, 50 years old here in the United States in a career and then be like, now what?
Hmm.
Because they've
Hmm.
been doing things that will get them to those places, and unless they try something different, I can't tell you how many women I know that are like switching careers or needing to or stuck, right? They've hit that ceiling or whatever. So being able to switch that, I think, is really, really important. But what are some tips on how to switch that energy and do that without like being like inauthentic, right? It's like, because if we all have it, there's a way that we can do it. Like, there's a way that I can actually, instead of asking a question, give a directive that will not be the same as yours, right?
Yeah. Now, one thing that I think is an easy thing to adapt, and an easy thing to put into practice, and it's fun to do, is looking for what we call role models. It's a complicated word, but if you find someone who is very skillful in using, you call it the other energy, I like that, in using the other energy, like giving orders in a way that everybody is willing and able to do what is said. And if you are from the more bossy side of life and are absolutely used to give orders, and maybe you find somebody who is very skilled in asking the right question
Hmm.
at the right moment with the right tone, in a way that everybody feels invited to the table and
Yeah.
wants to contribute. Now, this role model thing very often starts next door. There could be your
Mm,
best friend, who is
mm,
absolutely a fabulous listener, or a fabulous a person who asks questions or giving orders,
mhm.
right? So don't look too far. Don't go Hollywood. It is not necessary. Look close. Look someone in maybe in the company you work for, or someone at the university or the organization you work in. That is easy too. And then the second thing, the it is listening and watching. What is exactly happening when that person is talking? How is the energy in the room changing? And sometimes it is small things that make a whole of a difference.
Yeah.
Is someone standing in the middle of the room while shouting that order? Or
On a
in
table.
exactly, or at the door with the wall in the back. So, in terms of using the room, there is a million ways you could support, or may it support your goal, or make it less make it less heard and less easy to follow.
Mm,
So this is something. So take in the energy in a room. And what I found, I'm a chatterbox.
yeah.
One of my biggest lessons in life is saying nothing.
Yeah.
Be be quiet. Shut up. That is, to me, the most helpful thing. So in my notebooks, I very often, especially when it comes down to critical meetings, I write it down. Shut up. I look at shut up, and it's really important.
And it's just a reminder.
Yes, because to me, I'm quick with my thought. I'm quick with my everything. And very often it's not supporting what I want. It's not supporting my intention. So my lesson is sit and wait. And you have to find, if you want to learn the other skill, you have to find where you're good at. I'm good at talking. And then put that aside. Say like, hey, very well done. You're good at talking. Now, to learn something, you don't need the talking. You need to look. You need to watch. You need to adapt. You need to listen. How do other people do that?
Yeah.
So, and if you are someone who is coming from the opposite energy, sitting there, waiting, being very good at taking things in, processing things, you need to put together all your strengths and be the first or the second in a meeting to speak up. And if you are not confident enough to do it or to do that on your own, well, find someone in this meeting who starts the conversation and then turns to you with the first question so that you're obliged to answer it.
I love that. Because I'm a little bit like you, right? You can tell, right? No
That's why you do a
problem
podcast.
talking.
Yeah.
This is why we have fun.
Yeah.
But I have learned, and I love the idea of a role model. That's very much in my wheelhouse. I think that we're all role models to somebody, and we need to have a couple of role models that we look to for just about anything. And these tips are so good. The idea that I wrote down stop talking, right? So it's just like my son is
if you're
also
coming from that energy, right? If you're the opposite energy, then really find someone who asks you the first question.
And I because why can't I be somebody who asks someone else the first question as a little bit of help, right? So I know that if I stop talking, my clients will talk. If I stop talking, the rest of the committee will talk, or or the class. And but at the same time, if I know someone else wants to, like when I'm teaching, I'm definitely asking a question. I'm asking, what do you think about this? And being able to say, if I'm not filling the space, someone else will have that ability to do that. But I can also facilitate by helping other people by asking the first question.
And let me jump in here. We say teaching, right, or being a teacher. Another aspect that comes in when it comes down to communication is the aspect of power, right? And power plays such an important role. When in Asian cultures, and you know that better than I do, that the most senior person in the room has the last word. Right? If you're the boss of a Japanese company, you're mostly very senior, right? And then you only say one word in the end, hi, and things are done. So there is there's not much needed. And when you are teaching, even if you're acquired, you're facilitating, you determine the process. Even if you give room, if you give space, you determine how the space looks like. And that is a very important factor to take into consideration when you in all things communication. And I started changing power into relation. So what we have in every conversation we dive into, there is a relation. And if you make use of that relation, you're the host, I'm the guest. That is a relation. And there is things, expectations that come with that. I'm the employee, you're the boss. You are my colleague, my neighbor. There is always a relationship. And if we use that relationship, and if we have a close look, what are the parameters of that relationship, then it is much easier to find the right pattern. Of course, if I'm the employee, I'm not going to be bossy to my boss, right? It doesn't make sense in terms of power. Even
it gets you in trouble.
Yeah, or it might get you, and it might not get you what you wanted. For
Right.
instance, the budget for your next campaign, or the support you needed from other colleagues, or it can be everything. It doesn't need to be money necessarily. But taking that into consideration will help your communication skills, especially interculturally, a great deal.
You know, I had originally pay attention to the power structures, but I really love the way you talked about the relationship because um, when we stop looking at structures and we start looking at relationships, everything becomes much more malleable and flexible and organic, right?
It doesn't, and again, it doesn't mean just because we talk about relationships that we are friends all of a sudden. It's
Right.
not the point,
Oh
right?
no.
It's like acknowledging a distance, acknowledging power.
Yeah.
That is fine, but it is power is part of that relationship, and the more specific and the more emotional we can dive into that, the better our communication will be.
What are the biggest hurdles that you see people have in that area? I know I got basically fired from a job when I was in college because I was told I didn't know my place, which is basically not understanding the power relationship. And it was a little small company. And of course, I still look back on it and think, gosh, they had some egos. But at the same time, clearly I didn't know my place. Right now, granted, it doesn't mean that everybody's always right. But what kind of hurdles do you see people overcome or need to overcome in that area?
Again, it depends on from what energy you come from. The first hurdle I see, and that is probably the biggest one, is that you're in a stuck state concerning your own bias.
Oh, yeah.
You think, okay, this is the world. This is how the world is structured, and this is how it works. And it doesn't even occur to you that there might be a million other ways. So going into whatever communication situation and know for sure that your way is probably a good way. And next to your way, there's another way. And next to that, there is another one. And of course, we cannot hear all the ways, but already knowing that makes your eyes opening more, your
Mhm.
ears opening more, and your system being able to be sensible to what is going on,
Mm.
right? Even if you do not have a perfect solution or
Mhm.
the perfect phrase or word, which is not necessary, knowing or feeling or seeing that the person on the other side of the table has the power but is very insecure for
Mm.
whatever reason,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So if you understand that, it might change the words you were supposed to use just when you came from your own way of doing things. So this, I think, is the biggest hurdle, that
Okay.
our own bubble is so perfect that we think the rest of the world is like that.
Oh, yeah.
And the rest of the world is totally different. And this is a good thing. This is a very
Absolutely.
good thing. And the more we are open to that, the more we are open to other things. Did I run up and did I tell you the breakfast buffet in Hong Kong?
I don't know that we talked about that.
One of the things I totally amazed me was my first time in Hong Kong years back.
Sure.
And I've been in a hotel, we've been at the trade show, and I've been at the breakfast buffet. And to me, it was so amazing to see. I think breakfast is for many, many people a very sensible meal,
Okay.
right? With very specific and dedicated things you want to eat, you
Yes.
like, and.
Mine is the same every day.
Oh, that's fine, but it's a very
Yeah.
specific one, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
It's
Yeah,
a,
yeah.
it's a, it's a routine thing.
Yes.
Okay.
The
So,
less
and now
thinking
we
early in
were
the morning, the less thinking I have to do early in the morning, the better.
You see, or you like certain things, your taste buds are not that awake at the
Right.
moment. Anyway, and then you're standing at this breakfast buffet and you see people from really all over the world and see how different breakfasts can be defined.
Mhm.
to me, that was such an eye opener, and everybody happy, right? Everybody happy, everybody hunky dory. Hash browns and toast and pho, Vietnamese pho and Indian spicy samosas, everything in one buffet. And I think if you think about what is happening to us every day in our business life as this kind of breakfast buffet, that it could be totally different and still pretty good. That will help us to take what we want to have or to see or to do as one offer we can put on the table. And the others are invited to do the same from their side. And that will help people who are a little bit more introvert, who take time to find their way as well.
I like that. And like I said, I grew up in Korea. They don't that was our first foray into that idea that we have specific breakfast things, because they don't really differentiate much between breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's like kind of all the same food. And, Westerners are very specific. No, these are breakfast foods. Like we have a special breakfast for dinner if we want to do it as if it's some kind of special thing. But I like that because it's very relatable. It's extremely specific to each person, and it's a very relatable example of how we communicate differently. And one of the things I work with my clients on is perspective shifting. And I like to use the kaleidoscope as an example, right? If you look in it one way, like if you look in one end, you can see all these pretty things, but it still looks like a jumble. But when you look through it, it's this beautiful pattern. But all you have to do is shift it just a little bit, and you get another beautiful pattern.
Yeah,
and that's kind of like hand it to the next person and just see what shifts as you go to the next person. And so I love that, and being able, that's a whole new analogy I'm going to use, because it is a beautiful way to look at it and to understand. And I find that personal bias, that really is the hardest thing to overcome.
It's really, if you're not being careful as humankind, as everybody everywhere in the world, this is probably going to kill us. Really.
Oh yeah.
If you're so self-centered, and I'm saying self-centered, I'm not saying that we should let go of ego. Ego is a healthy thing.
For sure.
But in terms of perspective shift, the kaleidoscope, right?
Yeah.
Seeing that the same things in this kaleidoscope, there's the same parts, and you just shuffle, and then there is a different pattern. It's beautiful. And to do that, you just have to put yourself and the way you see the world next to the others, not above, not below. Very often we have that imposter syndrome. It's like, oh, I'm not good enough. I can't. That's not working as well, right? But you and what you do and what you think and what you feel are totally fine.
Yeah.
And someone else is as well. And then put together what is needed for that particular cake you want to bake, to use another analogy.
We'll just throw them around today.
Yeah, and then see what is in the end the best way to go.
Yeah. Well, and to even be able to say, okay, if I'm standing here with my eggs and turkey sausage and cheese, and you're there with your beautiful croissant and jelly and whatever, it's like we're still standing there, we're both eating breakfast, it's all good. And I think a lot of that is, I hear a lot of humility in that, and that's another thing that we're a little short on sometimes. So and I think that this is really good to be applicable everywhere, to be able to say, for starters, we're not one thing. We can change, we can learn, because we all have feminine and masculine. So we can actually be on that. It's a little bit of a spectrum, right? It's like we can slide back and forth. And if we've gotten as far as we feel like we can go with one kind, switch, just learn, but through watching role models. And I loved that you used my friends, because my best friend is much more in the masculine energy than I am. And we learn from each other, right? I am really like, what do you mean by that? And she's like, hey, do this thing. And and so we have different jobs and we do them differently, but we also complement each other very nicely. But being able to say I have a role model, and it's probably somebody close to me, because it's so intimidating sometimes to think about doing that. And then seeing those as relationships. All of this is very usable, relatable information.
Yeah, very. And the more easy you can make it for yourself,
Yeah.
and use yourself as an active part of that. Again, I'm no fan of letting ego go completely. Ego is totally helpful. Ego helps you to be who you are and to show the world who you are, because nothing is worse than a world that doesn't know exactly what to make of you.
Yeah.
Right? I remember a person I really liked, and she was very fuzzy in her thoughts, and whoa, everyone was real quirky, and I did my very, very best to position myself as a communication expert. And every time she, for some reason, told people, "Oh yeah, Katja is doing something with marketing." And I was like, okay, what on earth is wrong here that she is seeing me as a marketing person, which I clearly I'm not and never have been. So I make sure that really the world around you uh, can tap exactly into who you are. Not don't make yourself better or worse or
Yeah.
whatever, but make it very clear to the world what they can see, get, and expect from you. That is helpful for people when that makes you relatable and approachable.
Yeah. Um, yeah, this is great. I needed this morning, especially as I'm kind of jumping into the beginning of a whole new year and the way we're doing things. It's like, I don't know about you, but I kind of do a reset at the beginning of every year. And so, Katja, where is the best place for people to find you if they would like to learn more about what you do?
I'm very on one hand very old fashioned. I love using the telephone. So call me.
Okay.
Call me, honey. That's very easy. My telephone number is in on my website, which is of course the online thing. And my website consists of my first name and my last name, katjaschleicher.com, or the interview-training.eu for
Okay.
Europe. You find me on LinkedIn. There is only 2 people with my name, and one of them is me. So the other one is a blonde colleague. Again, we know each other, which is a
Oh,
very funny thing. Yeah, we got to know each other. Oh, because her brother called me. That was anyway, a different story. So this is easy, and of course, you still wow. How could that happen? You find me on Twitter.
excellent.
I'm still on Twitter. Media coaching.
So,
Yes.
and if you would like to hear a little bit more of Katja's story, then you can go to the intentionaloptimist.com. You can go to my podcast page, or just find us on Apple Podcasts or any place ever else that you listen to podcasts. It's Intentional Optimists, Unconventional Leaders. Because Katja, I consider you an unconventional leader, which is we use our skills in unique ways to do the exact thing that we're supposed to do. So this has been lovely today. For those of you listening for the first time, go check out the podcast because she has a great story that she shared with us there and some more jewels that she didn't share here. So she's got plenty of them to share with lots of energy. Thank you so much for your time.
You're absolutely welcome. It was a blast. Thank you.
Have a great one. Happy New Year.
Yeah, to you.